Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kim Cowie, your moderator for this morning. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the National Training Agency's third webinar. As a part of our agency's Technical and Vocational Education and Training Webinar Series 2018. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing today's presenter, Senior Coordinator CBQ and Enterprises from the Program Development and Management Department, Mr. Balchan Rambaran. His topic this morning is Sustainable Development in TVET.
Everyone is talking about sustainable development and sustainable development goals as we sit here this morning. But you may be asking the question, what does sustainable development has to do with technical vocational education and training? Technical vocational education and training has played a significant role in the development of the world thus far and will continue to do so in the future. Therefore, it is of utmost importance that we utilize TVET as a major vehicle in terms of achieving sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. And let me extend my appreciation and thanks to you all for joining us this morning as we engage your attention and participation in this webinar. In the month of June of this year, 2018, the National Training Agency of Trinidad and Tobago participated in a workshop held in Barbados by the Commonwealth of Learning on sustainable development in TVET. As a result of this workshop, the NTA is taking the opportunity to share the messages from that workshop. Therefore, today's presentation is going to focus, as the moderator said, on sustainable development in TVET. So our focus today is really going to be on 4 objectives as set down. The 4 objectives are to explore important concepts in sustainable development, to identify the role of TVET in achieving the sustainable development goals, integrating sustainable development principles in TVET programs, and to analyze the changes needed for sustainable institutions. In the first instance, we will want to talk a little bit about global goals for sustainable development and where these global goals came from. The global goals for sustainable development was developed by the United Nations, and it is adhered to by all its membership. There are 17 goals which have been developed for sustainable development. These goals really paint a blueprint for us to achieve sustainable development for all. In fact, it will guide our actions and behaviors as we seek to achieve sustainable development. In addition to this, UNESCO is also seeking to address sustainable development issues and goals through the work that they do. And you may be asking the question, well, what really is sustainable development? Sustainable development is all about seeking to meet the needs of the present without compromising those of future generations. And really, the things that we do today, the actions that we apply in today's world in terms of what we do to ensure that we leave the world and the planet that we have right now in a better place for future generations. So as we develop, we must have respect for all life, not just human life, but all life that exists, together with the natural resources that we have on the earth today. In addition to that, we must also seek to have social inclusion, where we look at the reduction of poverty, gender equality, human rights. Persons must have access to basic services, healthcare and education for all. So UNESCO, in its trust to look at the Sustainable Development Goals, have identified out of the 17 goals, goal 4, which is quality education, to put a lot of focus on in terms of achieving sustainable development. In fact, in UNESCO's 2016 to 2021 TVET strategy, it has outlined clearly how it's going to integrate sustainable development into technical vocational education and training. UNESCO also ascribes to the 3 pillars for sustainable development. And these 3 pillars really focuses on economic growth, environmental protection, and social inclusion. And what we are really saying here is that in order for you to have sustainable development, while we grow the world and our countries in terms of its economic growth, we must protect the environment. And we must also ensure that persons are included from all walks of life. So these are the three pillars to achieve sustainable development. Now that we have put a little context in terms of sustainable development and what are the sustainable development goals, we will now want to focus our attention a bit on TVET for sustainable development. And the question would have been asked, what is TVET for sustainable development? While TVET will focus and ascribe to the three pillars, in terms here it is stated as the environment, the economy, and equity, which is the same as your economic growth, the environmental protection, and social inclusion. It also has added two other dimensions there, which is skills and values. And when we say skills, we are not just talking about the hardcore technical skills, but we are talking about the softer skills. And in some cases, they refer to them as 21st century skills or employability skills or transferable skills, as well as the values that are there. These two other dimensions that have been added will really create and change the mindsets of individuals as we try to achieve sustainable development through TVET. What is the role really of technical vocational education and training in sustainable development? And there are basically three roles. TVET must ensure that those seeking to acquire skills and develop their skills for employment and decent work is achieved. So our systems and our processes in terms of our program offerings must be intact in terms of helping those individuals to achieve those skills that are necessary. On the other hand, TVET must also promote equitable, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth. And what we mean by that really is to ascribe to the three pillars of sustainable development. While we develop, we must protect the environment in terms of the land, the ocean, the climate, the ecosystems that exist. We must be able to protect them. And at the same time, include all persons as we go forward. The third dimension here for TVET, the role that for TVET play, is in terms of supporting transition to green economies. And what do we mean by transition to green economies? Is that within the industrial environment, there are a lot of new technologies, there are not a lot of new jobs, green jobs existing. TVET must play its role in supporting that. Again, by finding out what the industry really requires, doing the kind of labor market studies, finding out what are the green jobs presently, forecasting new green jobs that are in the environment, and so providing the necessary training offerings to deal with those programs. There's also now, looking at TVET again for sustainable development, the focus, not just here in the Caribbean, but worldwide, there's a renewed focus moving from education to sustainable development, to a strong focus on TVET for sustainable development. And while we understood what the role of TVET is all about in terms of development of people, in terms of their skill sets, for TVET to achieve sustainable development, it requires two very important issues to be dealt with. Those two issues are, one, raising the awareness in terms of how TVET can contribute to sustainable development, and two, changing the mindset of persons within the TVET system. Remember, people's mindset would have been cultured in a particular way. Now that we are changing, or we want to change to move to a sustainable development, changing the mindsets of individuals is critical to achieving sustainable development. But where do we focus our attention? Our focus has to be very strategic in terms of achieving sustainable development. So in the first instance, our focus should be on integrating sustainability into TVET programs. And when I say integrating sustainability into TVET programs, there are some things that needs to be considered from a very broad approach. Finding out what employers and the industrial environment would require, what businesses would require in terms of their needs. Finding out those needs would be integrated into your TVET offerings and your TVET programs that are available. Now, integrating them into the programs is fine, but also in terms of the delivery of those programs. So all the sustainable development issues and topics and areas of involvement in industry and businesses needs to come to the forefront in terms of being integrated into your programs. As well, new areas with green jobs must be identified, programs developed, people trained in those areas so that the businesses, the industrial environment will be able to benefit and be able to achieve sustainable development. And while all that is happening, we must ensure social inclusion in terms of access. People must be able to access our programs. And when we say access, we must allow access for all, the differently abled, in terms of gender, whether it's male, female, as the case may be, right? So all persons must have access, and as well, an equal chance of success. So in the first instance, we want to integrate sustainability into our TVET programs. Such programs can be categorized in the following 4 areas. You will have school-based programs in your secondary schools, and in this case, we may mention like the CVQ in schools, where you will want now to integrate sustainable development concepts into those programs. You will also want to integrate SD into your community-based programs, as well as your center-based programs, which is like your vocational schools, your training centers that are there, and in your enterprise-based programs, enterprise or apprenticeship programs within industry. And these enterprise-based programs are linked to your vocational schools in order to provide that dual mode of training. And while we talk about apprenticeship, we will want to stay on it for a minute with the next slide, because there's now a view of looking at apprenticeship as a key driver for sustainability. Across the UK, a lot of organizations are there into apprenticeship programs that will help to achieve sustainable development. And if I could quote from this source, apprenticeships are a valuable tool to implement the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Key drivers of sustainable apprenticeships are not only related to the Sustainable Development Goal 4, which is quality education, but they are a useful mechanism to advance the constitution of the SDGs. What they're saying here is that while apprenticeships will seek to address quality education, which is Goal 4, it is also going to address other sustainable development goals identified by the United Nations. On another note, another source is also saying that apprenticeships are the heart of the TVET system and brings together individuals who are motivated to develop themselves, employers who have that interest for continued development of their businesses, and employers now supporting programs with a wider social, environmental, and economic value. And this is what apprenticeship seeks to do. Just by the nature of an apprenticeship program and the way it is structured, the way it is run, you would be able to have that wider social connect, that wider environmental protection, and the development of that economic value. So apprenticeship now is being seen as a key driver of sustainable development. Another focus would be on how we deliver our TVET offerings in terms of our programs, and using an approach that can have a wider reach, wider access and so on. So the approach is one of a flexible and blended learning model. And by implementing such a model, what we will be doing is really ascribing to the pillars of sustainable development. In terms of expanding the access, getting more people into our TVET programs. With this model, the efficiency will also be enhanced, as well as you improve your quality and strengthen your institutions. Remember, the flexible and blended learning model is taking a different approach from your traditional classroom approach to training delivery, where it's seeking to bring other modes of training into one so that we can cater for the different learning abilities of different individuals. Because we know that people learn differently. So the outcomes of such a model would really seek to have more and different learners trained because of the access that it provides. The improved learning outcomes because of the different modes of delivery coming together in a blended approach. Those learning outcomes will definitely be achieved. Efficiency, it will create a more efficient program, strengthen livelihoods, and of course create new institutional business models in that your institutions now become more sustainable. So a heavy focus should be placed on a flexible and blended learning. Another focus would be on TVET and green growth, which really outlines a pathway for sustainable development as well. Now, remember previously we would have mentioned that TVET must support green economies. And what has to be done now is for the information from the industrial environment, from the business environment, to be researched, to be identified, and to be infused into the TVET system. So all your green issues and so on are now infused into your TVET system, into your TVET programs, which would help to achieve sustainable development. But not just only infusing the green economy issues, but also our teachers within the system needs to be informed, needs to be appraised of these green issues and how these green issues are going to be infused into your TVET offerings. So again, we must have some outreach activities for our teachers in terms of workshops and so on, so that we can prepare. In addition to that, the capacity of teachers to deliver on these green issues must be enhanced. So training programs and so on to develop your teachers are critical in terms of from a delivery perspective. So if we were to use this as a roadmap in terms of TVET achieving sustainability, we will be taking from the industrial environment, from the business environment, infusing the green issues into our TVET offerings in terms of our curriculum program design, developing our teachers in terms of their ability to understand the green issues and so on, and then their ability to deliver these programs to different individuals. Creating another focus would be on creating sustainable training institutions, right? And by creating these sustainable TVET institutions, there's a greening initiative that must be implemented. UNESCO has a 4-step process which has identified that institution can utilize to create sustainable TVET institutions. However, the approach must be a whole institution approach. Not just your TVET offerings should be infused with the green concepts, but the whole institution, which focuses on things like greening the campus, greening the curricula, greening the research and the culture within the organization. So really you're taking a holistic approach to your TVET institutions in terms of greening them. And the 4-step approach really is understanding the processes in terms of what is required for creating this whole institution approach. Then developing a plan, and then implementing the plan, but of course having a strategy for that implementation, and of course monitoring the progress. It is not something that will be done very easily. It will take a lot of work. It will require a lot of changes to the organization, because you're moving from what you traditionally would have done to new things in terms of achieving sustainable development. So with that, we'll bring a level of change to the organization. And integrating change in the organization will be critical to moving to the stage for sustainability. Now, change brings a level of discomfort, and we need to prepare people for that level of change. The change will be focused and associated mainly with the impact on the environment, the efficiency of how we treat with our programs and deliver our programs, the economic impact of these programs within the industry, access to these programs in terms of who can access these programs, the quality of these programs, and equity, where we try to treat with the equity issue of gender and inclusion of all. Continuing on change, there has to be a particular approach to change. Change needs support from the top. And what do we mean by that? If you don't have the support of your leadership, the management for change, then really and truly your change into becoming a sustainable institution would not be very successful. So you are required to have that top management support. The support of the top management must champion the change as you go forward. Now, one must consider change from the perspective of leadership and management. Many a times, we try to manage the change. The focus is on managing the change. Not much focus is spent on leading the change. If the change is not led, then you will have no one to follow. So the change must be led. Once the change is led, then the change can be managed. So heavy focus on leading the change. Now that we have looked at the changes and leading the change in the organization, if we take our minds back to the slides that were presented, where the focus would have been on integrating sustainability into programs, looking at the flexible and blended approach, looking at TVET and green growth, creating sustainable TVET institutions, looking at apprenticeship as a viable approach to training to achieve sustainable development. If we consider all those and the impact that all those will have through our TVET approach, then clearly we can see the road for sustainable development. And what would happen in a case like that? You would have trainees or individuals who, at the end of the day, would have the relevant skill sets to find a decent work and employment, or even create their own businesses in terms of becoming an entrepreneur. Of course, employers would get better workers, and not workers just with the technical or hardcore technical skills, but workers with those 21st century skills and values, which will seek to change the mindsets of individuals so that you can achieve sustainable development. And by far, if we have individuals like these who are there into those concepts, then of course the community will benefit, the planet or the world at large will also benefit. Okay, then truly we will be achieving sustainable development. And finally, another outcome would be your institutional sustainability. Of course, if you create the kind of sustainability that institutions, you will create that level of institutional sustainability for achieving sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that is the last slide of the presentation. And at this point in time, I want to pass you over back to our moderator, who will engage you in a little small session in terms of comments, questions that you may have. So I pass you back over to our moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Rambaran, for such an informative session. As Mr. Rambaran said, we will be moving on to the Q&A session. Remember, time is limited, so we will try our best to address as many questions as possible. So on that note, let us start with our first question. And someone wanted to know, Mr. Rambaran, does green development mean the same as sustainable development?
Well, there's a nexus between the two, but not just green development alone. Remember, we would have mentioned that to achieve sustainable development, your really focus should be on three main pillars, which is economic growth, environmental protection, and social inclusion. So someone may tend to infuse some green issues into one particular area, but then it doesn't augur well for sustainable development in terms of achieving that holistic sustainable development.
Thank you. I have another question here. Could you just please state again the 3 roles of TVET for sustainable development that you mentioned earlier?
So firstly, again, TVET must be able to ensure that we develop individuals with the right skill sets so that they can find decent work, they can be employable at the end of the day. So we must have individuals with those skill sets. Secondly, TVET must support sustainable growth. And when we say sustainable growth, we're talking about sustainable economic growth, which would include that while we develop in terms of our industries, our businesses, and so on, we seek to protect the environment, and we also seek to ensure that there's access and social inclusion for all.
Okay, thank you.
And thirdly,
yes.
if I should
yes,
mention,
sure.
thirdly is transitioning into green economies. And really and truly, you may have things happening in the environment that you need to identify presently in terms of green issues that must be treated with from a TVET perspective and be supported by TVET. And you may have things upcoming. You must also be able to find out what are those new things that are coming on stream within the industrial environment, so as TVET can support the transition to these green economies.
Thank you. And I have another one here. Can you elaborate in a practical way the concept of greening?
All right. The concept of greening really is focused on sustainability, but the concept of greening, if we have to look at it from creating a sustainable TVET institutions, is to look at greening from a holistic point of view. Not just looking at your TVET programs and integrating green concepts and issues in their programs, but looking at the institution as a whole, looking at the environment within the institution, looking at the people within the institution, looking at how we do things in the institution that will impact on sustainability. So you want to green your whole institution and that kind of thinking.
Appreciate that response. Another is, what is the role of universities and other institutions for the implementation of sustainable development?
Well, I think universities as well as TVET providers has a significant role to play because of the amount of individuals that we engage with from a day-to-day basis. Remember, all these individuals are seeking to find employment in the world of work. So therefore, the role of universities is to create the kind of individuals with that change mindset that will allow us to create sustainable development. Because if we don't change the mindsets of individuals, and if universities and TVET providers don't engage in a very strategic way to start to change the mindsets, then who will do it? Then we will end up with a lot of people in the work environment who are just traditionally going to go into the workspaces and do things as normal. We want people with that change mindset that understand that, hey, if we are to impact the world, we must do things differently. And we must consider, as we said before, if we are to achieve sustainable development, we must seek to develop the needs of the present without compromising those of future generations. So if we have that change mindset, and this is the role universities and organizations must play because of the amount of individuals we interact with on a basis.
Okay, you just spoke about impact, and someone here wants to know, has the NTA undertaken any initiatives to assist or support TVET institutions in promoting sustainable development?
Well, I would want to say this is one of the first initiatives, this webinar. Coming out of the workshop in Barbados, it was very eye-opening, even for me as an individual, to understand and get a full comprehensive view of sustainable development concepts, and how TVET can play a significant role. So I want to say this is one of the first approaches. However, I will also mention that within the NTA new strategic plan, our strategic goals and so on are aligned, and our strategic plan is aligned to the sustainable development goals as outlined by the United Nations.
Good. Is there anything else you wanted to add before?
Well, I know for our space and our TVET environment in Trinidad and Tobago, this may be new, but in not all cases, you may have some institutions who are already doing some work, right? Those work need to be highlighted. However, I think this is an opportunity here for the NTA, Trinidad and Tobago, to really capitalize on and to ensure that our TVET space takes up the issue of sustainable development in TVET and try to create our institutions in a very positive way to impact sustainable development.
Understood. There are now implications to curriculum design with effective domain objectives becoming more prominent, as well as methods for assessing these. Teaching methods must also be reviewed. Are we going to bring about these changes?
Well, I would say yes, we will need to bring about these changes, because based on what we have said in the presentation, if we don't bring about these changes, then we are not going to achieve sustainable development. We are not going to create the kind of individuals that would impact the issue of sustainable development in Trinidad and Tobago, and even in the wider region. So we need to have these changes.
In respect to the activities for teachers in the classroom, would critical thinking be encouraged in delivery modes?
When we mention the 21st century skills that TVET must integrate into its program offerings, it speaks to creative thinking. It speaks to critical thinking. It speaks to a lot of things that are not tangible, but are very critical in terms of achieving sustainability. What will be important is how we integrate these concepts into our learning offerings. It is not like your normal technical hardcore skills that you will deliver. It's a little more challenging, but we will have to find creative ways of how we can integrate these softer skills into your training.
Good. And how does the NTA intend to communicate the sustainable development in TVET in Trinidad and Tobago, especially with the users of TVET?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure, no problem. How does the NTA intend to communicate sustainable development of TVET in Trinidad and Tobago, especially with the users of TVET?
All right. Well, we can do this in a number of ways. It has not started as yet, but coming out of the workshop, I would have made some recommendations in terms of how we can do it. And we can, from an NTA perspective, we can do it through our engagement with industry, where we seek to develop occupational standards, integrate the greening issues and concepts from the industrial environment into your occupational standards, which would then be utilized to develop your curriculum and so on. That is one of the ways that it can be done. As well, when we seek to approve training providers and so on, ensuring our criteria that we have in that criteria aspects of sustainable development, so that providers know now that in order to deliver your TVET program, it must be done in a holistic approach so as to achieve sustainable development as well.
Okay, thank you so much for all of your recommendations.
I would just want to add one last thing.
Sure.
From an NTA perspective, the NTA in terms of forecasting its labor market needs and so on will be in a better position to identify in the world of work or in the industrial environment the new green jobs and forecast those two green jobs that are there, so as to promote the development of new green training offerings for training the individuals to impact the environment, so as to create sustainability.
Okay, and with this new emphasis on greening and social skills, can we expect an employer education thrust?
Well, definitely I would say yes.
Thank you. Unless you had anything else to add, I believe.
No, nothing much to add, but just to say that for all those who have been viewing and who have been participating, I really like the questions and so on, some very interesting questions.
I agree.
I hope I've been able to answer all of them. Additionally, coming out of the workshop in Barbados, we would have received quite a bit of material in terms of documents and so on that have been written on sustainable development and so on. We have those in our possession, and we can share those with you on our website and so on and make it available to you. And for those who have been viewing as well, if you have any further comments and questions, feel free to send it into the NTA so that we can provide any kind of response for you. With that, I would like to say thank you for all who have been participating and asking your questions, commenting, and so on. And that brings a close to our presentation this morning. So I thank you again.
Thank you. And to add to what Mr. Rambaran was saying, once again, Mr. Rambaran, thanks for an informative session. And we would like to take this opportunity on behalf of the NTA's management and staff to wish everyone season's greetings and all the best for the season and the coming year. And look forward to our upcoming webinar series in 2019 as well. And with that, I believe we can close. So thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Kim.
Welcome.